wabarakatuh. The subject of Bir al-Walidain, respect and kindness to your parents, in Islam is not only difficult subject, not only recommended to maintain, not only recognized as one of the most important and a pathway to your silence after Day of Judgment, but also but also quite an invitation to the fact, quite an invitation to self-contemplation. So if you are one of those people who already notice that your parents are not willing to change, yeah, and you finding it more and more difficult to observe them going through different life stages and making it more difficult and more challenging on you to connect to them and maintain spirituality, respect, kindness, and care for them, this is something that you might want to consider. The point number one is that if they almost the expiry date in terms of self-development is over, and it does happen actually by choice or by biological predispositions, then who, ask yourself a question, who is it that needs to pick up? Who is it that needs to maintain it? Is it that needs to draw boundaries? Who is it that needs to show up? And by now, you'll probably understand that the finger that was normally pointing out your parents is coming back to you. So have a moment and contemplate on just those two verses with me. In Surah Al-Isra, 17 verse 15, you're going to hear that whoever is guided is only guided for the benefit of himself, and whoever errs only errs against it. So if you and me are not doing our best in relationships with our parents, then the blame is not on your parents, but on you. So if you're not finding the solutions, you have to do it somewhere else. Simple as that. And Surah Al-An'am, Surah 6, verse 164, also sort of re-emphasizes something for us. It is other than Allah I should desire as a Lord, why He is the Lord of all things, and every soul and not to blame except against itself, and no burden of a burden will bear the burden of another. So no bearer of a burdens will bear the burden of another. So what does it mean? Is that whatever difficulties you have encountered because of your parents' parenting styles, including trauma, is not on you, is on them on the day of judgment in the grave, yeah, grave life as well. And whatever it is that it's upon you, once you mature, once you become baligh, whatever is it that you haven't done to your utmost ability, to expectations of you as a mature person or maturing person, then this will be on you. Okay. So what I'm suggesting is that if you were looking for other places, other resources, other resolutions, and you still haven't found one that actually maintaining this beautiful synchrony between your parents and you, then perhaps you want to sit down and go through this list with me and consider, is it you? Okay. Uh, and literally ask yourself a question: is it me getting myself here? Because any trauma, according to psychology, positive psychology, according to Islamic psychology as well, any trauma that has been inflicted on you, any harm that has been inflicted on you, so for you to pick up, the blame is on another person, but for you, your job is to do what? For every disease, there is a remedy, and your job is to go out there in the world and find it. So sit down and ask yourself question, not that usual question, what is it that they have done to me, but what is it that I'm doing to myself? Okay. So if you are one of those people who are not maintaining good relationships with your parents, those poor relationships between your parents that you observed or they had been sort of injected in you, like meaning you had been conditioned by them, are they created in you pathological attachment which are different than safe attachment? Maybe you are over clingy in your adult relationships, you are having anxious styles, or maybe you are distant and dismissive, you're doing this avoidant attachment. uh, are your are your parenting styles, if you are a parent right now, are sort of reminding you about dynamics in your birth home? Is it a case that you might subconsciously, unconsciously adopt the same parenting styles that you had experienced, um, and you perpetuating the cycle of trauma? Are your behaviors now in adulthood, now when we're expecting from you that you are a mature person, are somehow abusive, self-harming, aggressive, and sort of could come up in the term of risky behaviors. It could be even risky driving, you know? Um, uh, is that what's actually happening to you? You adopted poor coping mechanisms as in response to your unprocessed childhood or unprocessed current parenting experiences given to you by parents. Is it a case that you mental health right now also could be somehow classed as disordered, meaning you're experiencing anxieties, depression? Maybe you see on yourself post-traumatic stress disorder. Is your emotional regulation, meaning coping mechanism, healthy or unbalanced? I mean, are you finding it difficult to manage your emotions, the intensity of it? Like, are you finding yourself on a pendulum? You know, you have mood swings. You might even have emotional outbursts or numbness. You are oversensitive, or or call you completely frozen. You know, the emotional stimulus for you, they are just somehow difficult to process, and it leads to anxiety and depression. Are those strained relationships with your parents that you're experiencing also had influence on your self esteem and especially identity issues? Are you finding yourself that you are actually experiencing low self-esteem? You feeling inadequate in most of the times? You're asking yourself questions, am I going through, am I actually doing it, or am I going through imposter syndrome? Do I deserve it? You have this negative self-talk and self-image. You're constantly putting yourself down, or maybe you are stuck on blaming yourself, and you have this battle between inner guilt, and you feeling that everyone is shaming and blaming you. Therefore, are your social skills are also something that you need to work on. Perhaps you are finding it difficult to maintain a stable employment, or simply enjoying yourself in a circle of your friends or colleagues. And maybe your achievements, be it educational or career-wise, they sort of reflecting how you felt in your childhood, in the primary or secondary school. You could never be good enough, you can never deserve it. Perhaps you might also experience right now quite a disappointment with your cognitive ability or your cognitive performance. Perhaps you feeling that you should achieve better than you did so far, like you always finding yourself behind. Like it's almost like you feeling that your intellectual growth never had a chance to fully flourish. Um, um, we have studies who are actually based on a functional MRI, supporting that idea, that our interaction with parents are associated with our healthy brain development, and our cognitive effectiveness. Perhaps you are just a book case study. Are you experiencing stress from every single time interactions with your parents, and you see this on your physical health? You see it on your sleep disturbances patterns, and maybe outside even meeting with them, you're sort of finding yourself that your immune system is weak, and you don't really cope well with stresses related to job or to daily chores. Um, have you ever been actually diagnosed, or you've considered things like anxiety, depression, and any other uh, brain development issues? Um, including negative thoughts. It is also a mental health disorder. Maybe you over criticizing yourself over and over in your head, just like your parents did. It can go even better than that, you know? Maybe your autoimmune disorders, including other symptoms like diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, um, um, feeling exhausted, hair loss, skin issues, all of those things, they sort of somehow connected to your self-esteem and to how you can cope with the stress of not really belonging, of not really feeling support of your family, of not really finding a means to say to yourself, to own to yourself that actually this is it. It's not going to get any better. Meaning you still fantasizing about who your parents should be, how your parents should treat you instead of arriving at the reality of this dunya, accepting your qadr, that there is a point, and for some of us, this point is earlier than later in your life when you have to pick up where your parents left. So please go through this list again, re-listen to this list again if you must, and ask yourself a question, not from the perspective of, is that what my parents done to me, but is that what I'm doing to myself? Until today, I'm holding on to this victimhood paradigm, and is it me recreating this circle of quite a long list of pathologies, be it mental, emotional, spiritual, or somatic? It's a really important question to ask yourself, because if you're not going to ask yourself this question, how on earth are you going to wake up to proactivity? How on earth are you going to wake up from reactivity? If you're finding it interesting, there's so much more you could find out of how or on ways, clinically proven ways, on how to regulate yourself, but also how to manage those difficult relationships, by terminology, by statistics, difficult relationships with your parents. I am preparing 5 days challenge starting on 15th of January. Anyone is invited. Anyone who's interested in Islamic psychology and counseling perspective on how to position yourself in relationships with parents and turn this around into your ibadah. I hope to see you on the other side. And I hope I will serve you to the best of my ability. Until then, salam alaikum wa rahmatullah.